Welcome back. Today we're looking at a submission that dives into the conflict between Turning Point USA and Candace Owens. Specifically, it's a commentary on TPUSA sending cease and desist letters to smaller creators, making claims about Charlie and Erika Kirk.
Yeah, it's a messy one. I'm ready to jump in. The author is clearly passionate, but I think the execution, it gets in the way of the argument a bit.
I agree. So let's start there. Our first major focus is elevating the tone to match just how serious this legal topic is.
Let's do it.
The pervasive use of ad hominem attacks and, colloquial insults really undermines the objective authority of the legal analysis.
This was the first thing that hit me. I mean, the content itself is about some pretty heavy, sophisticated stuff.
Totally. Defamation, discovery, legal strategy.
Exactly. But the language used to describe the people involved, it's just so informal. I've got a list here. Dingbats, sicko fans, nut jobs, and phrases like up craps creek are just scattered everywhere.
Right. And I get it. The creator is feeling this moral outrage. I mean, the accusations are about human trafficking. So the anger makes sense.
It's completely understandable. The anger is valid, but you have to ask, what's the purpose of the video? Is it to vent or is it to inform? Because right now, the language just screams internet drama. When you call people sickos, you're telling the audience, we're here to throw mud. But the actual substance of the script is supposed to be a legal analysis.
So there's a total mismatch of genre.
Exactly. And you risk alienating the very people you want to attract. The person who clicks on the video to understand the legal jeopardy for wolves in finance or the actual strategy here.
Yeah, if they hear gloating and name-calling, they might just click off.
It just lowers the credibility. It feels less like an expose and more like a grudge match.
Okay, I see that. You want the creator to sound like the authority in the room, analyzing the fight, not jumping into the ring themselves. So how do we strengthen that?
I wonder if we could shift the persona completely.
How so?
Instead of being a combatant in this culture war, what if the creator became more of a legal observer?
A legal observer. Okay, so that implies a certain detachment and precision.
That's it. It means replacing all those insults with cold, hard descriptions of the liability these creators are actually facing. And the thing is, that approach is actually way more devastating than just calling them names.
Okay, let's use a concrete example. The text currently says, guess what? You're all up Craps Creek. Good luck to you all.
Right. Up Craps Creek, it's a cliche. It sounds like a playground taunt, It's easy to just brush off.
Yeah.
But imagine if that was replaced with a precise description of their reality. Something like, these creators have now opened themselves up to the discovery process, where they'll be burdened with the expensive and invasive task of proving the truth of their claims.
Oh, that has so much more weight. It shifts the focus from, I hate you, to, you have made a catastrophic error.
Exactly. One is an emotion, the other is a fact. Craps Creek is vague. Invasive discovery process, that's a specific, real threat. It elevates the narrator from a hater to an expert.
Okay, one more example on this point. The script discusses the really wild accusation that trafficking children through Liberty University. And the narrator calls the people making these claims insane and nutjob.
Which is, a pretty natural reaction. But does calling them insane actually dismantle the claim? It's just an assertion.
So what's a stronger approach?
Let the absurdity of the claim speak for itself. You don't need to add the insult on top. You just dismantle it by highlighting the, total lack of evidence and the severity of the libel.
So how would you phrase that?
I'd say something like, they have accused a private individual of international human trafficking without providing a single document of evidence to support the claim. If you say that, the audience will conclude they're nut jobs all on their own. You don't have to tell them.
Right, that empowers the audience. Much more engaging. Okay, let's move on. I want to look at the organization of the argument. This brings us to our second critique.
This is a big one for the pacing.
The narrative currently loops through these repetitive emotional beats instead of building a linear, escalating argument.
I felt this so strongly. It just jumps around. We start with the cease and desist letters. Then we jump to Candace Owens' character. Then back to the letters. Then to the narrator's feelings.
And we hear, Candace doesn't care about you, and TPUSA is right to do this over and over.
Yes, those points are hit multiple times, but without adding any new information, it feels like the wheels are just spinning, and the listener might think the narrator is just riffing instead of actually building a case. I wonder, what if we structured this like a legal thriller?
A legal thriller?
Well, yeah, a chronological action-reaction structure. It would build suspense and clarity. If you group the evidence logically, the listener can follow the escalation. It turns the script into a story, not just a list of complaints.
Okay, so a key issue is the timeline is all scrambled. Let's try to reorder it.
Right. I'd suggest a simple 3-part structure. Part 1, the trigger. Part 2, the strategy. Part 3, the response.
Okay, break that down with examples from the text.
For Part 1, the trigger. Start with the concrete evidence. The letter sent to the Wolves in Finance channel. The text mentions it was received on January 8th. Start there.
Don't start with Candace. Start with the letter.
Exactly. On January 8th, a small creator named Wolves in Finance received a legal document that changed everything. Then you can discuss the specific accusation made on that date about Erika Kirk.
That immediately grounds the listener in a real event. Okay.
Then, Part 2, the strategy. The source material talks about an analysis from Shady Lady Katie about a timeline pivot. Apparently, on January 12th, so 4 days after the letter, Candace suddenly shifts her whole narrative.
Yeah, the text mentions she pivoted to sci-fi stuff around them.
Yes, use that here. Show the cause and effect. The letter goes out on the 8th, and by the 12th, the narrative shifts from trafficking to time travel. That's your strategy section. You're connecting the dots for the audience, proving the legal threat worked instead of just saying it did.
And what's part 3?
Part 3 is the response. You end with Candace's reaction, her tweet. The text says she called it a terrible idea and offered her consulting services.
Right.
If you place that at the end, it's the climax. It tells a clear story. TPUSA strikes, the proxies scramble, and then the ringleader tries to laugh it off. That flows so much better.
Yeah, that's much clearer. It turns a rant into a report, gives the listener a sense of progression. Now, I want to move to our third critique, which I think it's crucial for the significance and relevance of the whole piece.
The so what factor?
Exactly. The piece touches on this really sophisticated legal theory about why TPUSA is targeting small creators, but it gets buried under all the emotional commentary.
This is such a missed opportunity. The user correctly identifies this fascinating dynamic. TPUSA isn't suing Candace directly.
Because, as the text says, she'd make a field day about it.
Right, but that crucial insight, which is a really sharp observation about asymmetric warfare, it's just sandwiched between complaints about grifts and stupidity. The listener could easily miss the strategic brilliance of the move because they're distracted by the emotion.
So the suggestion here is to isolate that martyrdom strategy analysis and really expand on it.
Precisely. What if we treated it like a chess match? Instead of just saying Candace is hiding, let's explain the mechanics of why this strategy is so effective. Why go after the pawns and not the queen?
Let's make that concrete.
We need to explicitly contrast the resources. The text mentions Candace has money for legal battles versus the little guys like Wolves in Finance. But we can go deeper. Let's talk about the mechanics of litigation.
The text mentions discovery.
Yes, discovery. That's the hook. The user says if they don't comply with the C&D, they face discovery. But don't just say the word, explain it. Make that the core of the strategic section. Explain why a small YouTuber can't survive discovery.
It's not just about losing the lawsuit.
No, it's the financial ruin from hiring lawyers, the forensic accounting, the exposure of all your private communications.
Whereas Candace might actually welcome that for content.
That's the chess move. Candace can monetize the fight. She can sell subscriptions, she has donors. The small creator, they just go bankrupt in silence. TPUSA is removing her pawns because the pawns can't afford to stay on the board.
The material also says Candace is hiding behind fake whistleblowers like Mitch.
Such a fascinating phrase, fake whistleblowers. But again, let's strip the judgment and just look at the function. Don't frame it as a character flaw. Frame it as a liability shield that she built. She outsourced the defamation to people who couldn't afford to defend it. She built a human shield of small creators to insulate herself.
That is a devastating critique.
It is. And it's so much more powerful than just calling her a narcissist. If you explain that she built a human shield, and now that shield is failing because TPUSA is targeting it directly, that's a sophisticated, compelling narrative. It elevates the entire piece.
It really does. It goes from Candace is mean to Candace is operating a failed legal containment strategy.
And that is what the audience wants to hear. They want the inside baseball. They want to understand the game.
Which leads perfectly into our final critique. We've talked tone, structure, strategy. Now let's talk about evidence.
specifics over generalities.
The argument relies way too heavily on assuming the audience knows the whole backstory instead of presenting the specific evidence clearly.
I noticed this too. The text mentions Charlie Kirk's death, which I assume is metaphorical, and dancing on his grave. It mentions Project Constitution and Diligent Denzian really quickly with no context.
It assumes the listener has seen every single previous video.
Right. And if a new listener tunes in, they hear horrible, hate-filled lies, but they might not know what those lies actually are, besides the one trafficking comment.
So the suggestion is to briefly contextualize the lies.
Yes. Instead of just saying horrible, hate-filled lies, which is a generality, pick one specific, distinct falsehood to dissect. Show why it meets the standard of defamation.
And there's a great example of this in the source material that just got glossed over.
The sci-fi realm.
Yes! The user mentions Candace claimed Charlie Kirk was a time traveler with X-Men superpowers.
It's such a bizarre, specific detail, but it was just mentioned so casual. Don't just list it, spotlight it. That detail contrasts so sharply with the serious reality of a federal lawsuit.
It illustrates the absurdity better than calling them dingbats.
100%. If you say, they're being sued because they moved from political commentary to claiming the subject is a time traveler, you've proven they're irrational without ever having to call them a name. The evidence does the work for you.
And what about the tweet?
The consulting services tweet. The narrator paraphrases it and calls her a narcissistic nut job. But the tweet itself is much better evidence than the insult.
The tweet says something like, difficult to put into words how terrible of an idea it was.
Quote it directly. Read the tweet in the script. Let Candace's own arrogance make the point. When she asks for a monthly retainer to stop the mess she started, that's a specific piece of evidence that proves the narrator's point about her mindset.
So to summarize that, don't tell me she's crazy, show me the time traveler claim. Don't tell me she's arrogant, read me the retainer tweet.
Exactly. Show, don't tell. It's the oldest rule there is, but it applies here just as much as anywhere else.
I want to circle back to one thing. The Wolves in Finance letter. The narrator says Shady Lady Katie noted it was received on Jan 8, but then they say, I personally have got no idea who that dingbat is.
That was a moment where the persona really undercut the authority.
How so?
Well, if you're presenting yourself as an expert saying, I have no idea who this person is, while discussing the central piece of evidence, it just makes you look unprepared.
It suggests you haven't done the full research.
Right. Even if the creator is small, a quick sentence explaining their role in this whole network would establish so much more credibility. It goes back to that legal observer persona.
A legal observer wouldn't just shrug.
No. They'd say the letter was sent to Wolves in Finance, a smaller channel that often acts as an amplifier for Owens' claims. That sounds professional. I don't know who this dingbat is, just sounds dismissive. It breaks the spell of authority.
It seems like the big theme of our feedback today is maturity. Maybe not adult maturity, but a kind of journalistic maturity.
That's a great way to put it. The source material has all the right ingredients. It has the dates, the legal theories, the smoking gun tweets, but they're all just mixed into this batter of insults and venting.
And our goal is to separate those ingredients out.
Exactly. We want to bake a cake that looks like a serious analysis. We want the audience to leave thinking, wow, TPUSA is playing 4D chess and Candace is in real trouble. Not,
wow, this narrator really hates Candace Owens.
Right. The former is persuasive. The latter is just preaching to the choir. And if the goal is to convince people or just inform them, persuasion has to come first. You can still be angry. Channel that outrage into the precision of the argument.
I like that. Weaponized precision instead of just insults.
It's much harder to deflect. If I call you a name, you dismiss me. If I lay out a timeline of your legal liabilities, you have to answer to the facts. That's how you win.
Okay, that brings us to the end. Let's recap the main points for the listener.
Sure. First, we talked about tone. Replace those insults with descriptive legal analysis. Use terms like liability and burden of proof to sound like a legal observer.
Second, structure.
Right. Structure it chronologically. The letter, then the pivot, then the reaction. Avoid repeating yourself. Build a story arc.
Third, the strategic analysis.
Highlight the difference between suing a public figure versus a small creator. Don't bury that lead. Explain why discovery is so destructive. Explain the human shield idea. That's the core of the whole piece.
And finally, specifics.
Use specific examples. The time traveler claim. The direct quote from the consulting services tweet. These are the anchors that hold your argument in reality.
Excellent summary. To the creator who submitted this, you have a strong grasp of the situation. You see the whole board. Now we just want you to describe the moves with the precision of a grandmaster.
We would love to see a version 2 of this script.
Absolutely. Apply these changes and send it back in. We'd love to see how it evolves. That's it for this critique. Keep writing and keep improving.
See you next time.